right, ladies and gentlemen, so what we're going to talk about next is lighting, and we're going to start with an empty level so you can kind of see the basics of lighting. And in our empty level, let's go ahead and save it. Oh, it calls it untitled. I should have called it lighting, but whatever. You can change the name, save current level as lighting. There. So I'm going to start off in unlit mode. And let's create a plane under shapes. Let's get a plane, focus on it, and let's make it nice and big. And I'll just scale that up like 10 times bigger. You can do that in the details panel. And let's put a cube on it. Stick that on top. Now one little trick is if you put something up in the air and you hit the end key on your keyboard, it'll actually stick it right to the ground. In lit mode, this is what it currently looks like because we don't have any lights in our level. So there's some things you need to add to your level in order to get lights, and those are first off, we need to have an atmosphere. We need so you hit this and you can just start typing. We need a skylight, and we need a directional light. Those are kind of three basics. So let's go ahead and build our lighting and see how this all plays out. Building the lighting is something you have to do from time to time, especially when you're making changes to the global lighting. And it kind of bakes in all those lights. And again, you just go to build all levels. Or you could do build lighting only, but for now, that's fine. Set it back to lit, and now you can see that we have all those in place. So what do they do? Well, your directional light, which can be rotated. You see the shadow. The best way to rotate this actually is with Control L. You can see that it does that, right? And when our directional light's way down here, you can see that we still have some light. And our lens actually adjusts so that it adjusts the exposure. And you can even get a nice little sunset. You can see the sun over there. The skylight is going to determine the shadows, how dark they are. So if our skylight's set to 1 right now, if I set it to 0.5, the shadows become much darker. And then if I were to go to nighttime, well, your lens actually adjusts. So unless I brought it really low, you're not going to see much difference. But if I set it to like 100, and again, to see everything, it's a little tricky. You actually have to build your lighting again to see how it's actually going to play out. But trust me, it would be much, much brighter. So let's pull that up here with Control L. Your skylight, if I were to create a location, and you don't have to do this, but that was completely blocked out of the sun, like this little space over here. Oops. Inside of this space, the skylight is still going to light it because it doesn't matter where the sun is, we're still going to have some ambient lighting in this area. So if I wanted to be able to see in the dark, I would need to turn my skylight up. And let's just try that for the sake of it. I'm going to set it to 10. And let's try building our lighting again. This is the kind of stuff you want to do pretty early in your level because it does take some time to have to build your lighting over and over again. And let's see what happens. It says it's done, and my computer froze. So, well, I guess there does have to be some light. Oh, that's right. With the new lumen system, it actually still does need some light in order for this process to work. So we are going to get some bounce lighting in here now. And it's pretty bright. But when I set my skylight to 0, let's just say 1, you can see that it gets much darker. Now, if I set it to 100, it's much brighter. If I set it to 0, none of that light permeates. So 1 is a good default. And you can see that there's auto exposure, so it gets lighter and darker as I come in here and I wait for my lens to adjust. It'll slowly start to brighten up, just like if you were going into a dark building or coming out of the movie theater, you know, you look up in the sky and this is what it looks like, and then it slowly starts to get darker. Okay, so let's be done with that. Now, for the rest of this, I want to talk about. Let's go ahead and make it nighttime. Control L. And let's throw some clouds in the sky to make this nice and pretty. We'll just use these volumetric clouds that come with Unreal, and we get a nice little sunset. And our skylight is still pretty intense right now. I probably need to rebuild my lighting again. And I wish this was all done in real time. There is a real-time capture here button, so you can click that. I don't know why you wouldn't want to. And I want to go even darker. So just barely any sun kind of poking through like this. You can see that it's pretty much pitch black now. So I'm going to create some point lights by holding down L. I'm going to click and add some point lights on the level. I'm going to adjust the intensity of these, how far out they reach, their attenuation. The bigger the attenuation, the more they cost. And you can even adjust the color. Let's make that one yellow. Okay. And so we can also create, and you can see the shadows actually reflect whatever color they are. I move this block around. The shadows change as well. Let's create some spotlights as well. Click on the plus, type in spot, or you can go into your lights and just pull it up that way. The spotlight's going to be pointing at something. So if I wanted to illuminate this block, it'll do that. You can change the attenuation radius. You don't want it to go any much longer than what you need because it does cost. The inner cone angle, as you can see what that kind of does. And then the outer cone angle is how wide it's going to spill. And then the you can also adjust the angle of this if you wanted to kind of maybe like light this up from two different angles. Push this one over here, and I'm going to make another one that lights it up this way. You can see a lot of complex things are happening here with the shadows. All these lines can be kind of annoying. If you ever want to not see all this, just tap G, and then you can see the level without all that junk, as it's going to be in game. Tap G again to get it back. One last thing that we might want to add to our world is some fog, so it doesn't look artificially black. We're going to go into the plus here and type in fog, and we're going to add some exponential height fog. I'm going to do Control L to get my light back. And let's look at the difference. Without it, it looks like this, blackness. With it, we get that. So it's a much more realistic way of having some atmosphere. You can turn up the intensity. How dense is it? No density, all the way dense. And it costs a little bit more, but volumetric fog is really nice if you wanted to really have a lot of fog. You can even bring the fog density up past 0.05. Let's say I set it to 1. That's pretty intense fog. But this is kind of a default of like the high end of what you might want your fog to look like. What's kind of cool about fog is it does give you like rays when the light's intense enough. So if I were to look up at this light and pull the intensity way up, we should be able, if the fog was thick enough, I would be able to actually see the streams of light coming in. But I would probably need to make the fog really, really, really thick, and it's going to look kind of ridiculous. Where's my fog? Which you can see right there, the rays are starting to come in. All right, you see these X's right here? That means that there's something wrong with our level. So it means that all these lights, nice sunset, cool lighting, they cost way too much and they can't, it's too much information for the computer to try to process. They're too close together. So if I were to move this one farther away, you could see that that X is eventually going to disappear. Well, that's because these are all stationary lights, which means that they stay put, but they cast moving shadows and they are going to be able to change in game. That costs a lot. So let's select all of our lights. I'm going to hold down Control, except for my sky and my directional light. But all the lights that I placed, the point lights and the spotlights. And I'm going to make sure that the... Oh, it's not letting me change them all at once. Let's just set the point lights. I'm going to set them to static instead. And I'm going to do the same thing to the spotlights. So here's the difference. Static lights are not going to move. They are not going to be able to change in game. They're stuck. The light's baked in. It is what it is. The characters' shadows, I think, still will be moving, but everything else stays the same. Stationary means these lights could change in intensity. They could turn off and on. They could do other things, but they cost more. And then finally, there's movable. Maybe your light's going to be swinging on a pendulum. It's hanging from a wire. They cost the most because now they have to change their shadows and the way everything's lit in game. So that's going to be a really high cost. For the most part, always leave them static. I wish that was the default, but it is not. It's stationary. But if you see a red X, you're going to have to change that. So you got to know the difference between static, stationary, and movable. And now if I hit play from here, last thing I need to do is build my lighting one more time. Once you're done placing all your lights, and really lighting, putting point lights and stuff, that should be one of the last things you do on a map because of the cost. And you're constantly having to build your lights in order to see it, and it drops your frame rate. So definitely start with your sky light, your atmosphere, your clouds, and your directional light. But all the point lights and stuff, again, that's kind of a late game kind of thing. You can see the colored lights don't really do much right now because there's a lot of light coming in from the sun. So let me just pull that down a little bit lower. All right, let's hit play. Still a lot of light bouncing around in the fog. The fog's so intense that any light from the sun is gonna illuminate everything. So it is what it is. But we're just kind of learning here. Let me turn off the volumetric part of it, and then we should be able to get a little bit darker. And if you need to, pull your intensity up because 8 is actually very low. More for like interiors, not exteriors. And just find that sweet spot. If you're not sure if you need to bake your lighting, generally when you hit play, it'll tell you. And it does say right now, hey, you got to bake your lighting. Remember, you can right click and play from here. I would bake my lighting again, but again, it's a long process. You keep having to go back and forth in order to do that.